In 1990, Martin Scorsese delivered a film that forever reshaped the gangster movie genre. Goodfellas wasn't just another mob flick, it became a wild, cocaine-charged ride through 30 years of mafia life that left viewers stunned and the industry permanently altered. Now imagine if the most unbelievable stories weren't in the movie, but behind the scenes. Today, we're uncovering secrets Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, and Lorraine Bracco have kept buried for years. Real mobsters showed up on set almost daily. Ad-libbed lines left even veteran crew members rattled. One scene felt so authentic, federal agents actually confronted the filmmakers about it. And when the real gangsters who inspired the film appeared at the premiere, they sat just a few seats away from the actors portraying them. Think you know Goodfellas? The cast has finally opened up about the hidden truths of its creation. From a star who faced authentic death threats to the legendary moment that demanded 75 takes, this was filmmaking at the edge of danger. It wasn't ordinary cinema, it was a perilous tightrope walk between Hollywood and the real mob world. Martin Scorsese confessed, "Some days I wasn't sure if we were filming about the mafia or with them." After you hear today's revelations, you'll understand his words and never view Goodfellas the same way again. The story that nearly never reached the screen began with a book. Before Goodfellas made film history, it existed as Wise Guy, Nicholas Pileggi's explosive 1985 true crime account of Henry Hill's life. The adaptation almost collapsed several times, threatening to erase the masterpiece before it began. Scorsese himself admitted, "I refused to even pick it up at first. After finishing Mean Streets and Raging Bull, I felt done with gangster stories. When my agent sent over the book, I didn't even bother cracking it open. Weeks slipped by. The manuscript just sat untouched until luck shifted the course. In a rough moment in life, Scorsese remembers, a major studio project collapsed. Out of sheer desperation, I grabbed Wise Guy and phoned Pileggi in the middle of the night. My words were simple. This is the story I've been waiting on forever. He thought I'd lost my mind. Pileggi's comeback, I've been waiting on your voice forever. But obstacles appeared right away. No studio wanted to touch it. Producer Irwin Winkler admits it was seen as too brutal, too morally muddy, no one to root for. Where's the justice? Where's the consequence? We argued that was the entire purpose. Eventually, Warner Brothers agreed to finance, though not without hesitation. They feared lawsuits at every corner. As Scorsese notes, we were showing actual gangsters, some still breathing, some under government protection. Lawyers nearly froze us out constantly. The workaround? Disguise identities, alter timelines, merge characters. Yet even that stirred trouble. Henry Hill, bound by witness protection rules, wasn't allowed on set, Pileggi adds. His being there could put lives at risk. Still, he sneaked in several times. He couldn't resist witnessing his past dramatized. The script itself grew out of chaotic, obsessive collaboration. Scorsese and I went at it non-stop, Pileggi remembers. Grueling 15-hour stretches. I'd recount anecdotes from my research. Marty would pace the room, cutting me off with, "That's a moment, that's a scene." The film took shape like a documentary stitched with narrative threads. Ray Liotta, chosen as Hill, carved out his own unusual path. "I practically shadowed Scorsese," he jokes. "I cornered him at a restaurant, later at a festival, nearly wound up arrested the third time. But deep down, I knew I was Henry. I knew it like a truth in my blood." The executives lobbied for bigger stars, Tom Cruise, Alec Baldwin, household names. Casting director Ellen Lewis recalls, "Marty refused to budge on Ray, saying he embodied the mix, charm masking volatility, wit behind his eyes. The studio relented only because De Niro and Pesci were attached." De Niro's preparation verged on extreme. Bob even dialed Jimmy Burke in prison, the real man behind Jimmy Conway, Pileggi says. Guards cut off the call after realizing the contact. Reaching out to such inmates was a federal violation. Bob didn't flinch. It was all part of digging deeper. That hunger for detail cost us. Technical advisors with criminal ties refused to reveal who they were. Scorsese shares, "They'd walk us through truths only insiders held, how kickbacks move, the precise method of slicing garlic thin with a razor, the right technique for pistol whipping without leaving evidence. None of this was in research libraries. Most unnerving was the vetting system. Scripts were quietly circulated to people linked with the real crew," Pileggi admits cautiously. Notes returned with no context, just curt corrections. Didn't go like like that. We accepted the edits, no questions asked. Out of that mix, the film's jagged, subjective rhythm was born. This wasn't designed as another polished mob fantasy. As Scorsese concludes, we were documenting a human life, one that happened to belong to a gangster. Henry's perspective had to shape the entire style. A jittery addict on cocaine, always scanning over his shoulder. When pre-production wrapped, the weight of what they faced truly sunk in. We were bringing to life men who killed for less than being portrayed the wrong way, Liotta recalls. There wasn't a single guard around. The set was wide open. Anyone could walk right in. Back then, things weren't locked down the way they are now. I found myself checking under my car before starting the engine. The book Scorsese nearly tossed aside was about to become the defining movie of his career, yet the real dangers had only just begun. The improvisation that shook audiences across America, funny how. Two small words that rewrote film history, and they never appeared in the original script. It's about the way you spin the story, the rhythm, the attitude. Funny how. That scene, Liotta admits with wide eyes, wasn't rehearsed at all. The now legendary moment where Pesci's Tommy flips from joking to menacing in seconds, twisting "you're a funny guy" into a death sentence, was drawn from Pesci's own life. Joe once shared it in rehearsal, Scorsese remembers. As a young waiter, he had told a mobster he was funny, and it didn't land as a compliment. The atmosphere turned heavy. Joe thought that was the end of him, right there. From that memory came Scorsese's spark. That's the scene. It captured the randomness of violence in their world. Instead of carefully writing it out, Scorsese told Pesci and Liotta to improvise. "We didn't warn the others at the table what was about to happen," Liotta confirms. Their anxious laughs and strained reactions, all real. They believed Joe could actually snap. This became the blueprint for much of the film. Marty whispered conflicting instructions to each actor before cameras rolled, recalls Lorraine Bracco, who played Karen. He'd send me one direction, Ray another, completely opposite. The unease it stirred was exactly what he wanted on film. The unscripted touches extended beyond dialogue. Take the scene where Tommy smashes the restaurant owner with his gun. Scorsese explains it was fully staged out at first, but then Joe asked, "Mind if I just go with it?" One take, no rehearsal. The shock you see is real. That rawness caused issues for the crew. Keeping track of continuity was nearly impossible. Script supervisor Dina Allen remembered every line, every move, changing constantly. The tone and emotion would swing wildly. Trying to document it was like chasing a storm. Even the infamous Layla montage, bodies in cars, garbage trucks, and freezers, was born from improvisation in the editing room. "We shot those killings separately," editor Thelma Schoonmaker explains. "The idea of tying them together as one chilling aftermath only came later." Marty asked, "What if we drop it all at once? The final bill." That single decision reshaped the entire middle act. The most demanding improvisation came with Henry's drug-fueled breakdown, his last day of freedom. That sequence was outlined but never fully scripted, Scorsese explains. He wanted the audience to feel Henry's paranoia directly, as if trapped in his psychosis. The helicopter tailing him? Not in the script either. It grew out of a logistical problem. Scorsese admits, "We needed to cover a lot quickly, while showing Henry's fear spiraling out of control." The unbroken shot gave that suffocating sense of speed and collapse. Henry's body wasn't faking it either. "I stayed awake for days. No drugs, just sleeplessness. It was method acting pushed too far. By the end, he was hallucinating between takes." The improvisation created authenticity even Scorsese couldn't script. Like when Karen aimed a gun at Henry's face in bed. Bracco leans in. "Ray's terror was real. In rehearsal, she clicked the trigger when she wasn't supposed to. It woke him in raw fear, and that's the take Marty kept." But not every unscripted moment came from the actors. The real Henry Hill wouldn't stop calling the set. Liotta says, despite court orders and studio rules, Henry kept phoning with corrections. "I wouldn't say that. I'd never do it like that." Eventually, Ray started slipping those notes into his performance. Some of the most memorable lines weren't his own. They came straight from Henry himself. Most memorably, the film concludes with Henry breaking the fourth wall, speaking straight to the audience in a last-second improvisation. Scorsese admits they tried a standard ending, but it fell flat. On the eve of the final shoot, he rewrote it entirely. Henry faces the camera, lamenting his lost life but still blind to his own guilt. Ray Liotta delivered it flawlessly in a single take. That raw spontaneity gave Goodfellas its restless pulse, a movie that feels alive, volatile, and endlessly fresh no matter how often it's watched. Scorsese reflects that they weren't making cinema by the book. They were bottling lightning as it struck, chaotic and risky, but unforgettable when it landed. The presence of real mobsters on on set. While Hollywood staged its mob fantasy, actual wise guys sometimes hovered nearby. They would just appear, assistant director Joseph Reedy recalls with unease, never introducing themselves, never explaining. They'd watch closely, sometimes nodding, occasionally correcting details. A cigarette held this way, money counted that way. Small, authentic touches. Their appearances weren't random. Scorsese admits word spread fast about the project. Figures tied to the real crew grew curious. Official advisors came from law enforcement, but Scorsese confesses that some of the most accurate notes arrived from nameless visitors who seemed to know the schedule. Ray Liotta remembers one unnerving encounter. He was rehearsing Henry's gestures between takes. An older man walked up, clearly not crew, and murmured, "Henry twitched his left hand, never his right." When asked how he knew, the stranger simply smiled. "Me and him did business," then vanished forever. The legendary Copa tracking shot got its own boost. "We're walking the kitchen route," Liotta says. A kitchen worker suddenly pulls him aside. "I saw Henry do this for real," he insists, showing every movement and greeting. Later, Liotta learned the man had worked at the Copa since the 1970s. He had been there that night. Such moments went beyond filming. While Bracco studied Karen Hill in Little Italy, she had her own encounter. A woman interrupted, offering no name, just a correction. Karen had far more elegance than shown on screen. "She was one of us," the woman explained, detailing her clothes and jewelry. Only afterward did Bracco realize she had spoken with someone close to the real Karen. Props and wardrobe faced similar scrutiny. Costume designer Richard Bruno recalls visitors pointing out watches, pinky rings, even the proper tie knots. One silent man finally stopped at a rack, tapped a suit, and declared, "Jimmy would never wear that color." The team immediately replaced it. Even the "never rat on your friends" speech drew responses. After the first take, De Niro was told by an insider that Jimmy would have been subtler, making the point less directly. They reshot, softening the delivery. Joe Pesci became a bridge. Old acquaintances would call him with reminders, portray it right, not threats, more like forceful nudges. Producer Barbara DeFina stresses these weren't official consultants. Nobody checked their IDs or roles. The result was an eerie production atmosphere. One day, FBI advisors were present, Scorsese laughs. The next day, it was people with very different loyalties, shaping the truth on set. The iconic prison cooking sequence drew exceptional scrutiny. That moment mirrored reality with exacting truth. Pelé explains, "We had step-by-step directions on how the inmates really made meals, slicing garlic thin with razor blades, precisely which dishes were prepared. Those details came from first-hand accounts of men who lived it." More unsettling were the occasions when accuracy turned into inadvertent confession. At times, someone visiting the set would watch us recreate a particular crime, Scorsese recalls cautiously, and offhandedly correct a detail that wasn't in the book, wasn't in the trial transcripts, something only an insider could reveal. It was like balancing on a moral high wire. Scorsese maintains they never set out to glorify criminals. What mattered was capturing their psychology and their environment authentically. Yet the border between studying them and being complicit sometimes felt shaky. The defining moment arrived when the movie finally premiered. Several real figures, disguised under fictional names in the film, came to see it themselves. Pelé discloses they sat quietly in the same screening room as the actors portraying them. The cast didn't learn of it until after the credits rolled. One even slipped a message, "You nailed it." Whether that was meant as praise or a veiled warning remains ambiguous. Beneath Goodfellas' groundbreaking aesthetic was a labyrinth of technical risks and breakthroughs that reshaped filmmaking. The legendary Copacabana shot, a continuous 3-minute passage escorting Henry and Karen from the sidewalk to their table, proved a near-impossible feat and redefined camera choreography. That long take wasn't crafted for spectacle, Scorsese stresses. It existed to immerse us in Henry's sway, to see how doors literally opened before him, to witness how privilege bent reality. We had to sense this uninterrupted, without edits. Pulling it off bordered on the unachievable. We practiced all day, says cinematographer Michael Ballhaus. 15 takes followed, each one flawed. The Steadicam operator sweated through the night, threading cramped hallways while maintaining flawless composition. The breakthrough came through mathematical discipline. Ballhaus recalls recalls, "We plotted every single stride, taped markers for footsteps, synchronized door swings and background extras, everything timed like a symphony where one slip would shatter it. That effort set a benchmark for the long take in cinema." In the wake of Goodfellas, filmmakers began treating such shots as essential tools, Scorsese points out. But for us, the sequence was rooted in narrative purpose. That distinction mattered most. The frantic helicopter pursuit, capturing Henry's drugged-out paranoia, demanded an entirely new production strategy. Our challenge was to externalize Henry's unraveling mind while keeping the plot legible, explains editor Thelma Schoonmaker. The breakthrough was syncing the cutting pace to his spiraling panic. Edits became quicker, harsher, as his day collapsed into chaos. That required shooting from an overwhelming range of perspectives. Dashboard dials, spinning rotors, mirrors, simmering sauce, pill bottles being sorted, hundreds of fragments stitched into a sequence that lasts only minutes. Innovation reached into the audio as well. Sound designer Skip Leavesay recalls inventing what they termed audio flash-forwards. Snatches of dialogue from the next scene bled in early, mimicking Henry's racing thoughts. It conveyed the sensation of a mind shattering under pressure. The groundbreaking integration of popular music with an almost non-stop soundtrack covering 30 years brought forward both artistic hurdles and technical obstacles. Scorsese remarks that no movie had attempted to use such an overwhelming amount of popular songs before. The production was nearly derailed simply by the staggering costs of securing music rights. A prime example was the notorious pistol-whipping sequence set to Donovan's Atlantis, which showcased the film's exacting technical craftsmanship. Maker explains that the brutality was timed with precision to align with the rising peak of the song. To make it work, they subtly altered the film speed to match specific beats that demanded brand new technical tricks. Showing the cast visibly age over 25 years required pioneering approaches to makeup artistry. Alan Weisinger, the lead makeup designer, clarifies that they couldn't just throw on heavy prosthetics. These mob figures didn't age like regular citizens. Excess, paranoia, and violence shaped their faces differently. To capture this unique deterioration, the team studied photographs of actual gangsters as reference. Production designer Christy Zia emphasizes that one of the hardest parts was keeping every detail accurate as decades passed. The story spans from 1955 through 1980, meaning much more than simply updating wardrobe and cars. They had to rebuild the entire texture of each era, from the polished aesthetics of the 50s to the loud, flashy tones of the 70s. Each period was marked by its own carefully chosen color palette to quietly signal the flow of time. Even the narration demanded unusual methods to succeed. Traditional explanatory voiceover wasn't enough, Scorsese points out. Henry's inner monologue needed to feel present, sometimes contradicting the visuals, sometimes giving way to Karen's point of view mid-sentence. This effect required innovative sound mixing to make it feel like slipping into a character's mind rather than hearing an external storyteller. Ballhaus, the cinematographer, notes that even the aspect ratio was a considered decision. They selected 1.85:1 over widescreen to box the characters into a smaller frame. Despite their riches, these mobsters lived in a suffocatingly tight world, and the framing needed to echo that psychological trap. One of the boldest stylistic choices was the sudden freeze frame moments. Scorsese explains that when something shocking happens, the brain sometimes seems to stop time. They wanted to replicate that neurological jolt cinematically. All of these techniques shared a single goal: to immerse the audience in Henry Hill's point of view. Every creative decision circled back to one core idea: what does Henry feel right now? Technology was always the servant of that purpose, not the other way around. The end result wasn't merely a gangster story, it was a film that pulled viewers into the raw psychology of its characters. Scorsese admits the innovations nearly exhausted the crew, yet what emerged was a cinematic experience unlike anything that had come before. It wasn't just a film about a criminal life, it made viewers live inside that reality for 2 intense hours. When it comes to acting, the performances in Goodfellas redefined the craft itself. Joe Pesci's Oscar win was only part of it. These portrayals set new standards that still influence actors today. According to Scorsese, the cast's refusal to seek sympathy was their secret weapon. None of them softened their characters for likability, and that was revolutionary. Ray Liotta's performance as Henry Hill shattered old rules. He explains that he didn't try to judge the man as good or bad. Henry was simply telling his version of events, warped logic and all, leaving the audience to decide what to feel. That neutrality gave the performance a raw authenticity that unsettled viewers. Scorsese recalls that Ray conveyed Henry's unfiltered delight in the gangster lifestyle. Most crime films tried to insert pangs of guilt into their protagonists. Henry Hill, by contrast, never second-guessed himself, which made his story both more frightening and more believable. Pesci's Tommy DeVito remains one of cinema's most volatile creations. Pesci admits he often kept fellow actors in the dark about his next move. That unpredictability sparked genuine fear on screen, since no one knew whether he'd whisper or explode. His intense preparation included practicing emotional whiplash, shifting from laughter to rage without warning. The shine box scene remains the ultimate showcase of this technique. Scorsese reveals that while Frank Vincent expected a flare-up, he had no idea of the full ferocity that Pesci would unleash. The genuine shock captured on film made the moment unforgettable. Robert De Niro's Jimmy Conway radiated a different kind of menace. Scorsese observes that De Niro understood real power doesn't require shouting. Jimmy's menace resided in his silence, his gaze, and the smallest movements. Pally remembers that De Niro even practiced mob-style habits like counting money with precise order. For Lorraine Bracco, playing Karen Hill meant breaking stereotypes. She refused to be depicted as a helpless victim or mere decoration. Bracco insisted that Karen knowingly embraced the world's perks and risks. Her choices highlighted how complicity and corruption reached beyond the men. Scorsese adds that Karen enjoyed the status and even found excitement in its danger. Bracco herself points to the famous scene where Karen hides the gun. She wasn't horrified, she was thrilled. That uncomfortable reality explained why some women gravitated toward mobsters, something few films dared to show. Paul Sorvino's portrayal of Paulie redefined how mob bosses were represented. Scorsese notes that Sorvino's quiet, restrained delivery projected immense authority. Paulie rarely needed to raise his voice or explain himself. His silence conveyed total control. Sorvino achieved this by subtly altering his facial muscles until his eyes appeared lifeless. He explains that once he discovered how to drain expression from his gaze, he knew he had captured Paulie's essence. This transformation cemented his dominance on screen. The collective performances worked as an ensemble, with every actor following the same uncompromising rules. Scorsese makes clear that nobody was chasing a spotlight moment for awards. What they recognized was that these characters lived inside a closed system with its own invisible order. The most striking element was the cast's willingness to portray people without soft edges. Today's audiences often expect flawed heroes to still possess redeeming traits, Scorsese points out. Instead, the actors leaned into roles that were magnetic yet ultimately corrosive. They resisted the urge to dilute their darkness for the audience's comfort. This honesty showed even in the smallest behaviors. Liotta carefully observed Henry's mannerisms, from the way he gripped cigarettes to his gestures in conversation, remembers Pally. De Niro paid attention to Jimmy's habits, such as never eating with his hands and always picking up a fork, even for bread. These details weren't random flourishes. They were cultural observations captured and brought on screen. The dedication of the performers shaped the production at every level. If a line didn't feel real, they refused to deliver it. Scorsese explains this came not from pride, but from a duty to accuracy. Joe would insist Tommy wouldn't phrase something that way, and time proved him right. That rigor led to portrayals that resembled documentary more than scripted drama. What appears on screen isn't acting in the usual sense, Scorsese reflects. It's existence itself. The cast slipped so fully into their roles that actor and character blurred together. This effort reshaped performance standards, proving that audiences could engage with characters who lack easy likability, that moral depth could be more compelling than tidy hero arcs. After Goodfellas, Scorsese observed, the definition of powerful screen acting was rewritten. Authentic portrayal overtook surface charm as the measure of greatness, leaving a mark that changed cinema's direction. When Goodfellas debuted in 1990, it wasn't merely another success story. It rewrote the language of filmmaking, leaving fingerprints on everything from The Sopranos to Pulp Fiction to prestige TV today. On the Monday day after release, producer Barbara DeFina remembered the phones lighting up. Young directors weren't calling to book meetings or chase opportunities. They wanted insight into the craft itself, the rhythm, the approach. It felt as though a new grammar of film had been unveiled. The revenue proved its power. With $46 million earned domestically against a $25 million budget, the uncompromising vision triumphed. Executives who once resisted every move now scrambled to take credit, Scorsese recalls with a dry grin. The same studio heads who had pushed back against the brutality, the ambiguity, and the narrative form. Suddenly, they were champions of bold, creative choices. The stylistic risks that once seemed dangerous became the industry template. After Goodfellas, narration in cinema shifted meaning, notes critic David Thompson. It turned into a tool for shaping identity, a way to highlight the distance between actions and words. Later works like House of Cards and The Wolf of Wall Street borrowed directly from this innovation. The fractured timeline, leaping forward, circling back, opened fresh narrative doors. Before its release, nonlinear storytelling lived mostly in art house spaces, recalls screenwriter Nicholas Pileggi. Afterwards, it entered the mainstream. Pulp Fiction may have expanded it, but Goodfellas had already proven the approach could succeed with wide audiences. For the actors, the aftermath was immediate and intimate. Liotta admits, "For years, I couldn't get offered anything outside of gangster roles." That performance felt almost too real. Casting agents struggled to see beyond it. Overnight, Joe Pesci shifted from supporting roles into stardom, he recalls. Yet the transition wasn't simple. Audiences wanted Tommy DeVito in the flesh. Many walked away let down when he wasn't unhinged. The character clung to him long after the cameras stopped. Lorraine Bracco, by contrast, faced a different type of restriction. She hoped to explore Karen's layered complexity, she explains. Instead, roles offered boiled her down to mob wives, stripped of nuance. Just ornamental women repeating warnings to their husbands. That repetition grew stifling. More than anything, the film altered how crime tales unfolded on screen. Before Goodfellas, the genre leaned either toward glossy myths or moral lectures, says Martin Scorsese. We presented the allure and the downfall together. The beauty and the rot played side by side. This double vision shaped the blueprint for modern crime narratives. Without Goodfellas, The Sopranos would never have existed, observes critic Alan Sepinwall. David Chase expanded this philosophy, pairing the mundane with the savage, family dinners with bloody hits, and stretched it into a series. Meanwhile, the movie's visual choices became foundations of contemporary style. Long tracking shots, sudden freezes, and whip pans transformed into the everyday grammar of cinema, notes cinematographer Roger Deakins. Flip through any prestige series today. Goodfellas' fingerprints cover the screen. Its music design, using era-specific pop as commentary, redefined scoring. Once, needle drops marked transitions or mood, explains supervisor Randall Poster. Afterward, songs themselves carried narrative weight. Tarantino pushed it further, but Scorsese proved pop could serve as narrator. For Scorsese himself, the movie was vindication after turbulent years and backlash from The Last Temptation of Christ. Goodfellas reminded Hollywood of his ability. He admits it gave him creative credit he still spends to this day. Few at the time realized how strongly it foreshadowed America's appetite for anti-heroes. We didn't grasp we were writing the rule book for decades of main characters. Scorsese reflects that audiences could loathe the deeds but remain drawn to the people. Tony Soprano, Walter White, Don Draper all sprang from Henry Hill's tangled morality. What began as invention soon became standard practice. Techniques like mid-scene freezes, on-screen text, and switching narrators shocked then, recalls Thelma Schoonmaker. Now they're taught as fundamentals in film schools. As for the real Henry Hill, success was more curse than blessing. Though hidden in witness protection, he constantly exposed himself. Pileggi recounts how he bragged in bars about being the guy from the movie. Eventually, officials dropped him entirely. They said no one could keep him safe. But maybe the most lasting effect is how it fueled young filmmakers. Nearly every major American director under 60 cites Goodfellas as essential, observes historian Peter Biskind. It's the most quoted, dissected, and replicated film of its generation. Scorsese watches its cultural shadow with mixed emotions. We wanted to show the emptiness that lurked under the riches. He stresses the hollow core beneath the flash. Still, countless viewers focused only on the thrills and dominance. They ignored the warning completely. That misreading doesn't erase its artistry. The greatest works often face distortion distortion, Scorsese admits. What counts is that decades later, people debate it not as history, but as a work that still breathes and provokes. Perhaps the sharpest sign of its power came from Henry Hill himself. He once confessed he couldn't distinguish his own past from what the movie showed, Pileggi shares. For a filmmaker, that's the most staggering praise. The fiction overshadowed the life it depicted. To conclude, the story starts with memory itself. And so we reach the end of this deep dive into the truths behind Goodfellas, from the book nearly shelved to the improvisation that unsettled a nation, from the mobsters on set to the actors whose craft reshaped cinema. These accounts change how we view this American landmark. What keeps Goodfellas alive isn't only its craft or originality, it's the rare convergence of timing, talent, and risk. A director working at full force, actors unafraid to portray deeply flawed people, a crew balancing the line between chronicling a world and colliding with it. In truth, making the film echoed the dangers of its subject. It was a tightrope where triumph and collapse nearly touched. Scorsese and his collaborators gambled reputations, even safety, to deliver honesty. That devotion to messiness over simplicity produced a film still crackling with danger long after release. Cinema teaches us that true masterpieces are born from daring choices, from artists brave enough to reveal the messy, conflicted sides of humanity. The fact that this movie exists at all shows how creative passion can triumph over safe formulas. It set a new bar for what audiences believed American filmmaking was capable of achieving. If this breakdown of a groundbreaking classic fascinated you, don't forget to tap like and subscribe to catch more explorations of the films that shaped our world. We bring forward the hidden narratives most channels won't touch. Tell us, which moment in Goodfellas left the biggest mark on you? And did this behind-the-scenes journey shift your perspective? Share your thoughts with us below. Coming up next, we dive into the hidden history of another legendary production, the turmoil, clashes, and near collapses that almost kept a masterpiece locked away. Trust me, you'll want to see it. Grateful for your time, and remember, just like in life, the boldest films are the ones unafraid to confront us with truths we'd rather avoid.